Golden Cage, the notification sound from Marcus John's phone, had become as addictive as any drug. Another funding milestone. Another tech blog mention. Another invitation to another exclusive event where the wine cost more than most people's monthly rent. Babe, you're doing it again, Elena Vasquez said from across their Oakland apartment, her voice carrying that familiar note of gentle concern. She was hunched over her drafting table, surrounded by sketches of water filtration systems and solar panel configurations. Her dark hair fell in waves around her face as she worked, completely absorbed in designing something that might actually help people. Marcus looked up from his laptop screen, where green numbers danced across spreadsheets like tiny celebrations of his success. Doing what? That thing where you disappear into your phone, even when I'm right here? Elena set down her pencil and turned to face him fully. We were supposed to review the community center plans together tonight, remember? The one in East Oakland? He had forgotten. Again, the community center project was Elena's baby, a sustainable building that would serve as both a neighborhood hub and a showcase for affordable green technology. It was exactly the kind of work that had made him fall in love with her 3 years ago, back when they were both scrappy dreamers sharing ramen noodles and big ideas. Right, sorry. Just give me 5 more minutes. The lawyers want to finalize the Series B terms tonight. Elena's expression shifted, something indefinable closing off behind her eyes. It's always 5 more minutes with you lately. Marcus felt the familiar spike of irritation. Couldn't she see what he was building? Green Flow Technologies was on track to revolutionize renewable energy storage. They were 6 months away from a potential IPO that would set them both up for life. The community center would still be there tomorrow. Look, I know I've been busy, but this is important. We're changing the world here. Are we? Elena asked quietly. Or are you just changing your bank account? The words stung more than they should have. Marcus closed his laptop with more force than necessary. That's not fair. Everything I'm doing is for us. For our future. Is it? Elena stood up, crossing her arms. Because last week you told me we couldn't afford to donate solar panels to that school in Fruitvale. But today I saw you dropped $15,000 on a watch. Marcus glanced down at the Patek Philippe on his wrist, a congratulatory gift to himself after closing their latest round of funding. That's different. It's about image. People need to see that we're successful if they're going to trust us with their money. And what about the people who need to trust us with their communities, their children's futures? Elena's voice remained steady, but Marcus could see the hurt in her dark eyes. When did we stop being about solving problems and start being about solving the right problems for the right price? You don't understand the pressure I'm under, Marcus said, standing up and beginning to pace. Every day, there are competitors trying to steal our technology, investors questioning every decision, employees depending on me for their livelihoods. I can't afford to look weak. Weak? Elena's voice cracked slightly. Marcus, do you hear yourself? When did caring about your community become weak? When did staying true to your values become a liability? He wanted to explain, to make her understand the delicate ecosystem of venture capital and market positioning that governed his world now. But looking at her, really looking at her for the first time in weeks, he saw a stranger. Not because she had changed, but because he had. The woman who used to stay up all night with him, sketching out plans to bring clean energy to underserved communities, now felt like someone from another lifetime. Maybe, he said slowly, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. Maybe we're just growing in different directions. Alana went very still. What does that mean? Marcus looked around their apartment, at her sketches covering every surface, at the second-hand furniture they'd bought together, at the small succulent garden she tended on the fire escape. It all felt cramped suddenly, limiting. Nothing. Like the penthouse lifestyle his new circle of friends enjoyed. It means I think we want different things now, he said, each word carefully chosen. I'm building something bigger than just ... this. And I need someone who understands that world. Someone who fits better into your image, Elena said. And it wasn't a question. Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Outside, the Oakland hills sparkled with lights from modest homes where families were probably sitting down to dinner together, present and connected in ways Marcus was realizing he'd forgotten how to be. I'll pack my things, Elena said finally. Elena. Wait, but she was already moving toward their bedroom, her shoulders straight and proud. Despite the tears, Marcus could see threatening at the corners of her eyes. He stood frozen in their living room, surrounded by the sketches and dreams they'd shared, knowing he was about to lose the most genuine thing in his life and somehow unable to stop himself from letting it happen. Seeds in concrete, the Phoenix heat hit Elena like a physical wall as she stepped off the Greyhound bus, her 2 duffel bags containing everything she owned slung over her shoulders. 3 months had passed since that night in Oakland, and the wound still felt fresh every time she breathed. But Phoenix was home, dusty, sprawling, and full of problems that needed solving. Her childhood friend Rosa Delgado was waiting by her beat-up Honda Civic, arms crossed and wearing the same fierce expression she'd had since they were 12 years old, plotting ways to fix the broken playground equipment at their elementary school. About time you came back, Rosa said, pulling Elena into a fierce hug that smelled like coffee and determination. This city needs you more than some tech boy ever did. Rosa had been working as a community organizer in South Phoenix for 5 years, fighting for everything from better street lighting to affordable housing. Her apartment was a 1-bedroom shrine to grassroots activism, with maps of the neighborhood, covered in colored pins and stacks of petition forms on every surface. I don't know what I'm doing here, Elena admitted that first night, sitting on Rosa's couch and staring at her laptop screen. Her savings were nearly depleted, her career felt derailed, and Marcus's voice still echoed in her head. Someone who understands that world. Then let's figure it out, Rosa said simply. But first, you're coming with me tomorrow. There's something you need to see. The next morning, Rosa drove them through the Garfield neighborhood, where Elena had spent her elementary school years. The area looked worse than she remembered. More vacant lots, more boarded-up windows, more families sitting on porches because their air conditioning had broken, and they couldn't afford to fix it. They stopped at a chain-link fence surrounding a concrete lot where the old community center used to stand. A sign announced plans for luxury condos, starting at prices that would have been laughable if they weren't so obscene for this neighborhood. Developers bought it 6 months ago, Rosa explained. Tore down the only place kids had to go after school, seniors had for their programs, families had for celebrations. All for condos that none of the people who actually live here can afford. Elena stared through the fence at the empty lot, her engineer's mind already seeing possibilities. The space got perfect southern exposure. The old foundation was still, partially intact. Water and electrical access were already established. What if we built something better? She said quietly. With what money? Rosa laughed. But it wasn't dismissive. The city's broke, and every grant application I've submitted, it's buried under red tape. Elena was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Marcus's $15,000 watch, about the venture capital world where millions flowed toward problems that already had solutions, while real problems went ignored. What if we didn't need their money? She said finally. What if we built something small? Something proof of concept, something that showed what was possible. That afternoon, they met Tommy Kim at his construction company's cramped office. Tommy was a second-generation Korean-American, contractor who'd inherited his father's business and a philosophy of doing right by his community, even when it wasn't the most profitable choice. You want to build what, where, for how much? Tommy asked, leaning back in his chair after Elena finished explaining her vision. A micro-community center, Elena repeated. 1,500 square feet, solar-powered, built with recycled and locally sourced materials. Space for after-school programs, senior activities, community meetings. And I want to build it for under $50,000. Tommy was quiet for a long time, studying the rough sketches Elena had drawn on napkins during lunch. My dad always said the best buildings solve problems, not create them, he said finally. And this neighborhood's got problems that need solving. But 50,000? Elena, that's materials cost alone, usually. Not if we're creative, Elena said, her confidence growing as she spoke. Shipping containers for the main structure. I found a company that sells damaged ones for cheap. Reclaimed wood from construction sites for interior finishing. Solar panels from a company that discounts panels with minor cosmetic damage. She pulled out her phone and showed them photos she'd been collecting innovative community spaces. Built on shoestring budgets around the world. A library in Bangladesh built from bamboo and recycled bottles. A community kitchen in Detroit, constructed entirely from salvaged materials. The architecture itself becomes the message, she continued. We're not just building a space. We're showing people that sustainability doesn't have to be expensive, that communities can solve their own problems if we just think differently about resources. Rosa was grinning now, the same expression she'd worn during their childhood schemes. And when the city council sees what we've accomplished, ... They'll have to take notice, Elena finished. Not because we asked for permission, but because we proved what was possible. Tommy nodded slowly. I know a guy who runs a salvage operation, and my crew's been looking for something meaningful to work on between the big commercial jobs. He paused, then extended his hand. Count me in. But I want to document everything, costs, timeline, challenges. If this works, other communities should be able to replicate it. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in the empty lot with the surveyors. Transit, mapping out the precise placement of their modest revolution. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, something about missing her, about maybe talking soon, but she deleted it without reading the whole message. For the first time since Oakland, she wasn't thinking about what she'd lost. She was thinking about what she was about to build and how it might change everything. The Phoenix sun beat down mercilessly, but Elena had never felt more energized. This was just the beginning. Rising tide 2 years after breaking ground on that first micro-community center, Elena found herself standing in front of a camera crew from the BBC, trying to explain how a shipping container and some recycled solar panels had accidentally started a movement. The Garfield Community Hub serves over 300 families weekly, she said, gesturing toward the bustling building behind her. Children's laughter echoed from the after-school program, while seniors practiced Tai Chi in the shaded courtyard, built from reclaimed concrete. But more importantly, it's proven that sustainable architecture doesn't have to be a luxury item. James Wright, the documentary filmmaker who'd driven down from Los Angeles after seeing a viral TikTok about Elena's work, lowered his camera. That's exactly the kind of soundbite that's going to change everything, he said, his British accent thick with excitement. Elena, do you realize you've built 12 of these centers across 3 states in just 18 months? She did realize it, though sometimes it still felt surreal. After the success of the Garfield Hub, requests had started, pouring in from community organizers across the Southwest. Each project had been different. A youth center in Tucson, built into a hillside using rammed earth techniques. A senior center in Las Vegas that doubled as an urban farming cooperative. A disaster relief shelter in rural New Mexico that could. Be assembled in 48 hours. Rosa jogged over from the hub's main entrance, her hair escaping from a ponytail and a clipboard clutched in her hand. Elena, Minister Okafor, is on video call from Abuja. She wants to discuss the Nigeria project. Elena's stomach fluttered with nervous excitement. 3 months ago, a video of their Phoenix centers had somehow made its way to Patricia Okafor, Nigeria's Minister of Housing and Urban Development. The minister had reached out through official channels, inviting Elena to consult on a massive housing crisis affecting millions of displaced families. "James, would you mind if we continued this interview later?" Elena asked. "This call could be double quotes world-changing." James grinned. "Go. I'll get some B-roll footage of the children's programs. This documentary is going to write itself." Inside the hub's small office space, Elena connected to the video call on Rosa's laptop. Minister Okafor appeared on screen, a commanding woman in her 50s with intelligent eyes and the bearing of someone accustomed to solving impossible problems. "Miss Vasquez," the minister said, her British accented English crisp and direct, "I've been following your work with great interest. Your breathing building concept, structures that generate their own power, process their own water, and adapt to their environment. This could be transformative for our refugee housing." Challenges. Elena had started calling them breathing buildings after a journalist noticed how her centers seemed to respond to their community's needs. Solar panels tracked the sun automatically, rainwater collection systems expanded during monsoon season, and modular spaces could be reconfigured for different activities throughout the day. "Minister Okafor, I'm honored by your interest, but I should be clear. Everything we've built has been small scale. Community centers, not housing complexes." "Which is exactly why I'm interested," the minister replied. "Every large-scale housing project we've attempted has failed because we tried to impose solutions from the top down. But your approach, it grows organically from community needs. It scales up through replication, not just size." Elena felt her pulse quicken. This was the conversation she'd been dreaming about since that first night in Rosa's apartment, staring at her laptop and wondering what came next. "What exactly are you proposing?" Elena asked. "A pilot program. 100 families currently living in temporary camps outside Abuja. We provide the land, basic infrastructure, and funding. You provide the design methodology and training. If it works, we scale it to thousands of families." After the call ended, Elena sat in the hub's quiet office, watching the sunset paint the Phoenix Mountains gold through the floor-to-ceiling windows Tommy had installed using glass salvaged from a demolished office building. Rosa burst through the door carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the biggest smile Elena had seen in months. "So?" Rosa demanded. "Are we going to Nigeria?" "We?" Elena laughed. "Rosa, you have a job here. A life. You can't just—" "Elena Vasquez, don't you dare try to do this alone," Rosa interrupted. "Besides, someone needs to document the community organizing aspects of what we're building. And someone needs to make sure you remember to eat while you're changing the world." That evening, Elena walked through the Garfield neighborhood, past houses where families were sitting down to dinner, past the corner store where Mr. Gonzalez always asked about her latest project, past the elementary school where children now had a safe place to go after classes ended. Her phone buzzed with notifications, messages from community organizers in Detroit and Portland asking for consultations, an email from a TED Talk coordinator, a text from her mother saying she'd seen Elena mentioned in a Univision news segment. 2 years ago, Marcus had told her she wouldn't fit into his future. Now she was building a future he couldn't have imagined. One container, one solar panel, one community at a time. She paused at the fence surrounding the old lot where they'd built their first center, now expanded with a children's garden and an outdoor classroom. The space buzzed with evening activities. teenagers playing basketball on a court made from recycled rubber, adults attending a e-cell class in the main hall, toddlers chasing bubbles while their parents chatted in multiple languages. Elena pulled out her phone and opened a new document. Verd Collective, she typed. A global network for community-driven sustainable architecture. The movement finally had a name. The fall Marcus Chun stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Palo Alto office, watching protesters gather in the parking lot below. Their signs were simple but devastating. Green flow equals green lies, and clean energy, dirty money. The irony wasn't lost on him that the building's solar panels, his own company's technology, were powering the news cameras broadcasting his downfall to the world. Marcus, we need to talk. Nathan Cross, his former business partner and closest friend since Stanford, closed the office door behind him with the careful deliberation of someone delivering terminal news. Nathan's usually pristine appearance was disheveled, his tie loosened and his hair uncombed. The EPA just released their preliminary findings. Marcus didn't turn around. He'd been expecting this conversation for weeks. Ever since Detective Rivera from the San Francisco DA's white-collar crime unit had started asking questions about their waste disposal contracts and environmental impact reports. How bad? Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside his chest. Catastrophic. Nathan's reflection appeared in the window beside Marcus's. The lithium processing facility in Nevada has been leaking heavy metals into groundwater for 18 months. The cleanup costs alone are going to be in the hundreds of millions, and that's assuming we can avoid criminal charges. Marcus closed his eyes. The Nevada facility had been his pet project, the cornerstone of GreenFlow's plan to revolutionize battery manufacturing through proprietary processing techniques that could reduce costs by 40%. Those techniques, it turned out, had involved cutting corners on environmental safeguards that existed for very good reasons. The board voted this morning, Nathan continued. Unanimous. You're out, effective immediately. They're also freezing your stock options, pending the criminal investigation. Criminal investigation? Marcus finally turned around, seeing his oldest friend's face properly for the first time in months. Nathan looked exhausted, older, defeated. The EPA thinks you knew about the contamination and covered it up. There are emails, Marcus. Reports that got buried. Safety inspectors who got reassigned after raising concerns. Nathan paused, studying Marcus's face. Please tell me you didn't know. Marcus wanted to say he didn't know, wanted to claim ignorance of the decisions made by middle managers desperate to meet impossible deadlines. But the truth was more complicated. He'd known there were problems, vague mentions in reports he'd skimmed, concerns raised in meetings he'd half listened to while checking his phone. He'd chosen not to dig deeper because deeper meant delays, and delays meant disappointing investors who trusted him with their money. I didn't want to know, Marcus said finally. Which I guess is the same thing. Nathan nodded sadly. The lawyers think if you cooperate fully, testify about the pressure from investors to cut costs, they might offer a plea deal. Maybe avoid prison time. Prison time. The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus thought about Elena, about how she'd warned him that success without values was just expensive failure. He'd dismissed her concerns as naive idealism. Now, standing in an office that would soon belong to someone else, surrounded by awards and accolades that meant nothing, he realized she'd been the only one seeing clearly. There's something else, Nathan said quietly. The story's going national. 60 Minutes wants to do a segment. The Times is running a front-page investigation Sunday. And someone leaked your compensation package from last year. Marcus had made $43 million in salary and stock options the previous year, while his company was secretly poisoning groundwater in a community with a median household. Income was $32,000. The optics were indefensible. His phone buzzed with another call from his crisis management team, but he let it go to voicemail. What was the point? No amount of spin could change the fundamental reality. He built his fortune by externalizing costs onto people who couldn't fight back, and now the bill was coming due. That evening, Marcus sat alone in his Atherton mansion. 5 bedrooms, 3 acres, views of the San Francisco Bay that real estate agents called priceless. The house felt like a mausoleum now, filled with expensive furniture he'd bought to impress people he didn't actually like, and art he'd purchased because advisors told him it would appreciate in value. He found himself scrolling through Alina's social media for the first time in months. Her Verd collective had exploded into international recognition. There were photos from Nigeria, where she was training local architects to build refugee housing using locally sourced materials. Articles about her breathing buildings concept being adopted by cities across 3 continents. A TED Talk with 4 million views titled Architecture as Democracy, Building Communities from the Ground Up. In every photo, Elena looked genuinely happy, tired sometimes, dusty from construction sites, surrounded by people whose faces radiated hope and purpose. She was building things that made the world better, while he'd been building things that made his bank account bigger. Marcus paused on a video Rosa had posted from the opening of their latest community center in Detroit. Elena was cutting a ribbon, with a pair of children, laughing as they struggled to coordinate their scissors. Behind them, families were already streaming into a building that would serve their neighborhood for decades, powered by solar energy and built from materials that would otherwise have ended up in landfills. The comments on the video were full of gratitude from community members, technical questions from architects wanting to replicate Elena's methods, and messages of support from people around the world. Real impact, measurable and meaningful. Marcus's doorbell rang, interrupting his spiral into self-reflection. Detective Rivera stood on his doorstep with a warrant and an apologetic expression. "Mr. Chun, I need you to come with us for questioning regarding the Green Flow environmental violations. You have the right to remain silent." As the detective read him his rights, Marcus found himself thinking about Elena's last words to him that night in Oakland. "I'm not the one who needs to fit anywhere. You're the one who lost yourself." She'd been right about that, too. 3 months later, Marcus would plead guilty to environmental fraud and receive 18 months in federal prison. His assets would be frozen to pay for cleanup costs. His name would become synonymous with corporate greed disguised as environmental progress. But tonight, as he was led away from his empty mansion in handcuffs, the only thing he could think about was how completely he'd misunderstood what success actually looked like. Full circle, the Copenhagen Convention Center hummed with the energy of 3,000 sustainability leaders from every corner of the globe. Elena adjusted her wireless microphone as she stood backstage, watching the previous speaker wrap up his presentation on carbon capture technology. Through the gap in the curtains, she could see the massive audience: government ministers, tech executives, nonprofit leaders, and activists all gathered for the Global Sustainability Summit's closing keynote. 5 minutes, Ms. Vasquez, said Dr. Amara Singh, the summit's chief organizer, appearing at Elena's elbow with her trademark calm efficiency. "The introduction is running a bit long, but that just means more anticipation for your talk." Elena nodded, running through her opening lines one more time. 3 years had passed since Verd Collective's work in Nigeria had caught international attention, and the movement had evolved beyond anything she'd imagined. Breathing buildings now existed on 6 continents. The open-source construction manuals had been downloaded over 2 million times. Most importantly, communities that had never had access to quality architecture were designing and building their own sustainable spaces. And now, please welcome the architect who's proving that the most sophisticated technology is often the simplest solution. The founder of Verd Collective, Elena Vasquez. The applause was overwhelming as Elena walked onto the stage. She paused at the podium, looking out at an audience that included heads of state, Nobel laureates, and community organizers who traveled from every inhabited continent. In the third row, she spotted Rosa, now Verd Collective's director of Global Community Partnerships, giving her an encouraging thumbs up. 4 years ago, Helena began, her voice steady and clear, I was living in a one-bedroom apartment in Phoenix, Arizona, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I just walked away from everything I thought I wanted, and I had no idea what came next. She clicked to her first slide, a photo of that original empty lot in the Garfield neighborhood, dusty and forgotten. This is where it started. Not with a business plan or venture capital, but with a simple question. What if communities could solve their own problems if we just gave them better tools? For the next 30 minutes, Helena walked the audience through Verd Collective's evolution. From that first shipping container community center to the refugee housing complexes in Nigeria. From the disaster response shelters now deployed across the Pacific Rim to the urban farming cooperatives, transforming food deserts in American cities. But more than the buildings, she talked about the people. Rosa and the mothers in Phoenix who'd insisted on including childcare in every community space. Tommy Kim, now training construction crews on 5 continents in sustainable building techniques. The teenage architect in Lagos who'd redesigned Atlanta's modular housing concept to withstand flooding. The grandmother in Detroit who'd figured out how to integrate medicinal gardens into the breathing building design. We call them breathing buildings, Elena explained, because they respond to their community's needs. They adapt, they grow, they change, just like the people who use them. As she spoke, Elena noticed a familiar figure in the back of the auditorium. Marcus Chun sat alone in the last row, looking smaller than she remembered. His clothes were simple, a regular button-down shirt and khakis, nothing like the designer suits he'd favored during their relationship. His face showed lines that hadn't been there 4 years ago, and his hair was graying at the temples. He was supposed to be in prison, Elena thought, then remembered reading something about early release for good behavior and community service. She forced herself to focus on her conclusion. The most radical thing we've discovered, she said, is that when you trust communities to identify their own needs and provide them with tools to meet those needs, they consistently create solutions that are more innovative, more sustainable, and more beautiful than anything designed in a boardroom. The standing ovation lasted nearly 3 minutes. Elena smiled and waved, but her attention kept drifting to the back row, where Marcus had remained seated, applauding quietly. After the formal reception, Elena was finishing conversations with a group of mayors interested in implementing breathing buildings in their cities when she felt someone approach from behind. Elena? She turned to see Marcus standing a respectful distance away, his hands clasped in front of him like a penitent. Up close, the changes were even more apparent. The arrogance that had once defined his presence was gone, replaced by something that looked like hard-earned humility. Marcus. She kept her voice neutral. I heard you were speaking here today. Earlier. This morning. Small breakout session on corporate accountability in green tech. He gestured vaguely toward the conference rooms. Nothing like your keynote. That was... Elena, what you've built is extraordinary. They stood in awkward silence. For a moment, surrounded by the chatter of delegates discussing policy frameworks and funding mechanisms. I wanted to apologize, Marcus said finally, for how things ended between us. For what I said about you not fitting into my future. I was wrong about everything that mattered. Elena studied his face, seeing genuine remorse where she'd once seen casual dismissal. Thank you for saying that. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. I didn't build this to prove you wrong. or to show you what you lost. I built it because people needed it, and because I finally stopped waiting for someone else to see my worth. Marcus nodded slowly. I know. I've been following your work, and it's clear this isn't about me at all, which is probably the most impressive thing about it. What are you doing now? Elena asked, surprised to find she was genuinely curious. Community service officially. I'm working with a legal aid clinic in Oakland, helping low-income communities fight environmental justice cases. It's not glamorous work, but it's single quotes quotes. He paused, searching for words. It's the first time in years I've felt like I was solving real problems instead of creating them. Elena felt something loosen in her chest, not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of closure she hadn't realized she needed. That sounds meaningful, she said simply. It is. Marcus looked toward the convention center's large windows, where the lights of Copenhagen twinkled against the dark harbor. Elena, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but I hope you know that watching what you've accomplished, it's helped me understand what I should have been building all along. Elena followed his gaze to the windows, thinking about all. The communities around the world where breathing buildings were taking root, where people were discovering they had the power to reshape their own environments. The beautiful thing about building, she said finally, is that it's never too late to start over. As long as you're building for the right reasons this time. Marcus smiled, a real smile, not the practiced expression she remembered from his startup days. Thank you for that. As he walked away, Elena felt Rosa appear at her side. How was that? Rosa asked, watching Marcus's retreating figure. Necessary, Elena said. And finished. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching. Delegates from dozens of countries exchange contact information and make plans to transform their communities. Tomorrow, Elena would fly to São Paulo to meet with favela leaders interested in breathing buildings. Next month, she'd be in Vancouver training indigenous architects. Next year, who knew? Ready to go change the world some more? Rosa asked. Grinning, Elena laughed, the sound echoing off the convention center's soaring ceiling. Always. As they walked toward the exit, Elena's phone buzzed with messages from community organizers on 3 continents, each one describing a problem that needed solving, a space that needed building, a future that needed creating. She'd never been busier, and she'd never been happier.